Alright, so hello again everyone. Yesterday I published this video here where I went over and compared Bantam versus Del Rey. Who did the Star Wars novels better when they had the license to publish Star Wars novels? And you guys seem to like that video. I put a poll up if you didn't know, so you can go vote on that, make your voice heard. Bantam or Del Rey, which do you go for? And I'd been thinking about doing a sequel to it, Dark Horse versus Marvel. Who did the comics better as it pertains to the Star Wars Expanded Universe / Legends continuity? And several people in the comments said the same thing. Do the comics next. And I had luckily jotted down a couple notes already, and now we're going to jump right into that. So, I think that this is a lot more one-sided than the Bantam-Del Rey debate. I don't think there's a right answer to your preference for Del Rey or Bantam. Either answer is entirely valid. In fact, the secret right answer is just to say both. But for the sake of comparing, if I had to pick a favorite, it's like picking between children, I had to go with Del Rey for a couple reasons I outlined in the video. But it was very, very not even apples and oranges. It was like good apples, and they're both like very thin margin, if any margin at all, because I just think they're both so super solid. With the comics, it's a little bit more one-sided, and that is just frankly due to the overwhelming amount of content for one publisher, whereas there's really not as much for the other. And of course, what I'm referring to is Marvel had the license from 1977. They published their first one, Star Wars issue number 1, an adaptation of A New Hope, in April of 77, and they published their last comic with the Star Wars Droids comic series in 87. So a 10-year run, a solid run. During that time, they published 107 issues of Marvel Star Wars with a couple annuals as well, I believe 3. And they published 14 issues of Ewoks, and I think 11 or 10 issues of Droids, but I'll edit into the comments with the numbers, because I may be off on that. Didn't have that one jotted down. But the original Marvel Star Wars run goes for over 100 issues. Then with the Star imprint, but it's still, I would say, published by Marvel, it's considered to be, for Ewoks and the Droids comic series. Both of those series are excellent, and they were aimed at children, but they also did pretty well, seemingly. Went for several issues. Dark Horse got the license, and their first Star Wars comic that they published was Dark Empire in 1991. Now, Dark Empire, as Chris Nelson covered in some of his videos, was something that was maybe going to have been published by Marvel, but then they dropped the license and it went over to Dark Horse. What's interesting, though, is that Dark Horse wasn't even founded until 1986, so it was only founded 1 year before Marvel moved on from the Star Wars license. That's a company in its infancy, so Dark Horse didn't get right on it and publish some Star Wars stuff the next year. It was seemingly a process, because Dark Horse didn't have anything published for them for Star Wars until Dark Empire in 91. But once they took over in 91, my, what a run it was. It was banger after banger. Just Dark Empire, and then they finished it up with Dark Empire 2 and Empire's End, and then just delving into the past with Tales of the Jedi, which was absolutely glorious. This is something, 90s Dark Horse is what I would refer to as the Veach era of Dark Horse, if you want to ascribe a name to that era of their publishing. And also in this time, 98, 99, they started to roll out the Tales comic series as well. So Dark Horse had more misses, but they had more swings at the plate than Marvel got to with their time with the license. And then the Republic series, which was just called Star Wars when it was unveiled, started to release before Phantom Menace in 98 with Prelude to Rebellion, and that went on to become one of the most amazing series ever. I mean, it influenced the name of this YouTube channel, with Quinlan Voss being amazing under John Ostrander's guidance. I would refer to 2000 to 2010 as the Ostrander / Miller period of Star Wars comics. John Jackson Miller was publishing some amazing comics with Knights of the Old Republic. Ostrander was publishing amazing comics not only with Republic, but knocking it out of the park with Legacy, and then eventually doing Dawn of the Jedi as well, which I personally enjoyed. And there was just so much good content coming out for Dark Horse. There's a couple that I've highlighted. I'll run through like my top 10 real quick. I mean, under Dark Horse, we have Republic, Legacy, Knights of the Old Republic, Dark Times, Tales of the Jedi, Crimson Empire, Dawn of the Jedi, Empire, Rebellion, Dark Empire. So good. All of these comics are great, and Dark Horse held the license from Dark Empire 91, released all of these titles and many, many more things that I've just mentioned, and took it all the way up until 2014. Now, the chronology that I've been following and outlining this debate and the eras in which these publishers had the rights doesn't end there, though, because in 2019, well, first of all, 2014, Marvel picked up the rights again, and they started publishing for the current continuity, but in 2019, they released 108, which is set in the old Expanded Universe continuity. So, Marvel did have a brief stint after Dark Horse for the Expanded Universe as well, which is interesting to note. Now, that being said, who can win this battle? And Marvel published some good comics under them, don't get me wrong. I want to highlight that first of all. I'm a huge fan of the original Marvel Star Wars comics. I have these beautiful editions right here in hardcover that are absolutely lovely, and I love going through those. Are they wacky and silly at times? Sure. But there is so much passion, creativity, stuff outside of the box, so much love. They're so interesting. They're so interesting, and they're so good. They are so good. I love the art. I love the storylines. I love the characters and the way they're presented. It's so fun to go in between the movies in those comics, and there's some zany, fun stuff that happens that goes down in those comics. They're just so good for the original Marvel Star Wars run. I also really love the Droids run that ties into the cartoon show. I'd say it's probably the weakest of all of the comics published under Marvel Comics for the Expanded Universe, but it's still not bad. It's really quite good. It's quite fun to follow the story of the droids. Their time travel adventure is pretty fun as well, and is interesting in its implications. And then the Ewoks run, love it. Pure fun. I love the Lizard Warriors. I love the Underwater Dwellers. I love Mount Sorrow. Come on, Mount Sorrow's fun. There is so much to love about those Ewoks comics. I read them so many times when I first got it, because it just feels like episodes of the show, which I also love, and they're just fun adventures, really enjoyable stuff. So the Ewoks run was also very fun. Both of those, the latter two published under the Marvel comic license, were published with the Star imprint, as I already mentioned, and were aimed at children, but I'd say they are solid and do pad out Marvel's experience with Star Wars comics in the Expanded Universe a little bit, but really it's only the original series. Now, what the original series benefits from is its longevity, right? 107 and then eventually 108 issues. Great. More content, the more there is great stories that we can really love, that we can really enjoy. And it does benefit from having a long time to build these storylines, build these elements, pad out the background of the universe, and give us characters that we're excited to tune into each week. That's great. But on the flip side of that, Dark Horse had very long-running comics with so many of theirs. Legacy, 50-plus issues. Knights of the Old Republic, 50-plus issues. The Republic, 80-some issues. Dark Times in the 40s. Tales of the Jedi, 30s or 40s. There's just so much content for Dark Horse, and there is so much good content. Some of my favorite characters are from Republic, Legacy, Knights of the Old Republic comic, Dawn of the Jedi, Tales of the Jedi, Crimson Empire. Like, need I go on? There's so many great Dark Times. Dash Jenner, gotta love him. There's just so many great characters, so many great stories told in those Dark Horse comic books. I'd point to some really strong arcs as examples for why Dark Horse is undisputedly, at least for me, in a much bigger gulf. The GOAT, when it comes to publishing Star Wars comic books. The Battle of Jabim in Republic is one of the greatest arcs in all of comic books, at least in my opinion. It is so gritty and does so much for expanding Anakin's character and explaining why he ends up how he does. It really shows the horrors that he saw during the war, the absolute horror and tragedy of war. It deals with so many morally gray subjects and the implications of it for the Republic. Are we the good guys? We're abandoning these people. And it dovetails so well into the In the Shadows of Our Fathers arc that we later saw during the Empire Rebellion run of comics during that time, where Luke goes back there and deals with his father's legacy. Beautiful, beautiful stuff. In Tales of the Jedi, right, we have the ultimate saga of Ulic Qel-Droma and his brother Kay. Exar Kun's a wonderful villain. Nomi Sunrider's a wonderful powerhouse of a character. These stories, these characters are amazing. Their saga is legendary. It's epic. It's amazing stuff in Tales of the Jedi. Dark Empire, despite its controversies, I really enjoy a lot of it. And it's interesting the way it deals with Palpatine's return. It's fascinating in its depiction of Luke falling to the dark side. Leia is written really, really well in those comics as well, and it introduces some new Jedi characters, some new love interests, some side characters that are very, very interesting to read about as well. And it's a great art style. It's truly really good stuff too. Crimson Empire is this really ultimate story and really, really just epic little saga there, and it truly is how the EU is. Take a background character from a panel and tell his story. Like, how expanded universe is that? It literally expanded the expanded universe by springboarding off of Dark Empire and running with this concept regarding Kirkanos and Karnar Jax and their awesome, awesome story. Dark Times takes what we saw in Republic and takes it even darker, even grislier, showing the brutality of the Empire and showing why the Rebellion had to fight so hard against it. It does. The Dark Horse comics did such a good job of padding out the expanded universe in fascinating and intriguing directions. It was masterful. And while I love the original Marvel comic run so much, and yes, maybe I could straight swap it for like Legacy, or for Knights of the Old Republic, or for Tales of the Jedi, or for Republic or Dark Times. Maybe I could straight swap it. You know, I have those Marvel comics. They're right there in my top 5. They're right up there with the best of them, the heaviest hitters. Well, I could straight swap those Marvel comics and take them over any one of these awesome, prevalent comic series that Dark Horse put out. I couldn't take it over 2 of them. Never mind 3 or 4 or 5. Not even mentioned all of these random single issues here and there, these mini-series that were produced, Obsession, Purge. I'm not even going to go on down that extensive list. Dark Horse dominated the comics for Star Wars, and I think it would be really hard for anyone to argue otherwise. I think this is way more one-sided than the Bantam Del Rey debate was. And I love those original Marvel Star Wars comics, but Marvel just didn't have time. They didn't have time with the license. And while it benefits from a long run, and it does have 2 smaller series along with it, Dark Horse just had enough time and so much imagination, creativity, and passion from their writers that I personally regard some of the Dark Horse comics as some of the greatest comics ever written. In all of comics, in all of Star Wars. Some of the best Star Wars stories come from the Dark Horse comics. You can't get more epic than Tales of the Jedi. You can't get more interesting in Republic, redefining the prequels. People who hate the prequels love the Republic comics for what they did. Legacy, taking the story hundreds of years further. You think it's going to be horrible, and it's so interesting, and the world building is fascinating. Dark Times takes it a notch darker, ups the stakes. Great stuff. Dawn of the Jedi shows us the origins. While it didn't have time to live and breathe and build like the other series did, it was still beautiful for what it was able to accomplish, in my opinion. So many of these comics are so good, and I've revisited them tens of times for each of these runs. I've read many of these runs multiple times. They're just so good. Just go to the library and rent those Dark Horse comics and take them with me on a plane flight, a car trip, and a lot of fond memories just invested in the Dark Horse comic books. The Dark Horse comics, they mean a lot to me. And the Marvel comics, for even how much in my heart I love that original series run, I just can't take it over Dark Horse. And I think it's here and here. There's a gap. It's not like Bantam and Del Rey. But let me know in the comments what you guys think. Do you prefer Dark Horse or Marvel when it comes to the Star Wars comic books? There may be some nostalgia for the original Marvel run. Even though I wasn't alive when it was first coming out, I've experienced that. You know, I adore those comics so much, and when I read them, I feel like I've like stepped into a time portal, and just it's magical. Those comics are magical, and nothing will ever take that away, in my opinion. Those original Marvel comics are so special to me. So maybe for some of you, there will be a nostalgia factor or a I grew up on these factor that puts Marvel over Dark Horse for you in the comic book debate between publishers for the Star Wars Expanded Universe. But for me, I just can't overlook how good Dark Horse was, how much great content there was for Dark Horse. It just feels like a one-sided race, a one-sided fight. But let me know in the comments what you think. Which of these is better? I ranted for a little bit longer than in the last video, but man, even I went off script from my notes. I had, bullet points pulled up for reasons for why I like Dark Horse better, but I just went off on a tangent on how good they are, and that just illustrates my point more. I have a lot of passion for the Dark Horse comics. But let me know in the comments, which do you guys prefer? The Marvel comics or the Dark Horse comics? Make sure to tell me your preference. I love hearing different points of the view in the fandom. People who like different books, some people like Dawn of the Jedi Into the Void. I'm one of those weird people who didn't think the Gambit duology was the worst thing ever put to paper. So we all have different takes, we all have different tastes, and that's wonderful. So let me know in the comments which of those two publishers you think was the best for Star Wars Expanded Universe comics. See you guys next time.